Sarah Matthews clutched the acceptance letter from Stanford University with trembling fingers. The cream-colored paper felt heavy in her hands, heavier than it should have been for something that represented her dreams. At 18, she had worked tirelessly for this moment, spending countless nights studying while her classmates went to parties and dated. Her dedication had paid off with a full scholarship, but now the letter felt more like a chain than a key to freedom. Her father, Robert Matthews, stood in the doorway of their modest kitchen, his weathered face showing the strain of recent months. The cancer had taken her mother 6 months ago, leaving behind a silence that seemed to echo through every corner of their small house in rural Oregon. Sarah watched as he poured himself another cup of coffee, his third since breakfast, and she noticed how his hands shook slightly. The medical bills had piled up despite insurance, and the farm they owned was struggling to stay afloat. "Dad, we need to talk about Stanford," Sarah said quietly, setting the letter on the wooden table between them. Robert's eyes met hers, and she saw something flicker there, hope mixed with resignation. "Sweetheart, you've earned this. Your mother would be so proud." Sarah felt her throat tighten. Her mother had always encouraged her education, often saying that knowledge was the one thing nobody could take away from her. But circumstances had changed everything. The farm needed attention, and her father needed support, both emotional and financial. Her younger brother, Jake, only 16, was struggling in school and had started hanging around with the wrong crowd since their mother's death. The sound of a truck pulling into their gravel driveway interrupted her thoughts. Through the window, she could see David Crowfeather stepping out of his old pickup truck. He was a Modoc man in his early 40s, tall and lean with graying hair that he kept in a traditional braid. David had been friends with her father for years, often helping with farm work and sharing stories about his heritage and his 2 young children. David's wife had died in a car accident 2 years earlier, leaving him to raise his 7-year-old daughter Emma and his 10-year-old son Michael alone. Sarah had babysat for them occasionally, finding comfort in their innocent laughter during her family's darkest days. The children adored her, often running to hug her legs when she visited their small house on the reservation. "Morning, Robert," David called out as he approached the house, his voice carrying the gentle cadence that Sarah had grown accustomed to. He nodded respectfully to Sarah, his dark eyes kind but tired. The weight of single parenthood showed in the lines around his eyes, and the way his shoulders seemed perpetually tense. Robert gestured for David to join them at the table. "Coffee?" "Thanks." David sat down, glancing at the Stanford letter. "Congratulations, Sarah, that's a tremendous achievement." Sarah managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Mr. Crowfeather. Just David, please. You're practically family now." The 3 of them sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken problems hanging in the air. David had his own struggles, working 2 jobs to support his children while trying to preserve his cultural traditions and keep his small piece of land on the reservation. The casino where he worked nights as security barely paid enough to cover basic expenses, and his day job at the lumber mill was physically demanding. "I've been thinking," Robert said suddenly, breaking the silence, "about Sarah's future and about how we can all help each other." Sarah looked at her father with growing concern. She recognized the tone in his voice, the same one he had used when he decided to sell their mother's jewelry to pay for her treatments, or when he chose to take out a second mortgage on the farm. "Dad, what are you thinking?" Robert cleared his throat and looked between Sarah and David. "David, you need someone to help with the children and the household. Sarah, you need to stay close to home right now, at least for a while. Maybe there's a way to make this work for everyone." Sarah felt her stomach drop. She could see where this conversation was heading, and it terrified her. "Dad, I can defer Stanford for a year, get a job in town, help with the farm." "No," Robert said firmly. "You're too smart to waste away in this small town. But maybe there's another path." David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Robert, I'm not sure what you're suggesting." "A marriage of convenience," Robert said quietly. "Sarah could help you with Emma and Michael, and you could provide her with stability and support. It would give her time to figure out her next steps without the pressure of college debt or leaving family behind." Sarah stared at her father in shock. The idea was so old-fashioned, so completely unexpected, that she couldn't immediately process it. Marriage? To David? The man was kind and respectful, certainly, but he was 24 years older than her and still grieving his wife. "Mr. Matthews," David said carefully, "I appreciate the thought, but Sarah is just 18. She has her whole life ahead of her. I couldn't ask her to give up her dreams to help with my children. It wouldn't have to be permanent, Robert continued, his voice gaining strength as if he had been planning this conversation for weeks. Just until Sarah figures out what she really wants to do. Until the kids are older and more independent. Until we all get back on our feet, Sarah found her voice finally. Dad, this is crazy. I barely know David outside of the times he's helped us with farm work. You know he's a good man, Robert replied. You know he treats his children well, that he's responsible and honest. That's more than a lot of marriages start with. David ran a hand over his face, clearly struggling with the proposal. Sarah, I would never want you to feel pressured into anything. Your father means well, but this is a decision that would affect your entire life. And yours, Sarah pointed out. You're still mourning your wife. The last thing you need is a fake marriage complicating your life. It wouldn't be fake, Robert interjected. It would be a real marriage with real commitment and real support for each other. Just maybe not the kind of romance you read about in books. Sarah looked out the window at the fields where she had played as a child, where she had dreamed of escaping to bigger cities and greater adventures. The irony wasn't lost on her that her ticket to freedom was also the thing that might keep her tethered to this place. But as she thought about David's children, about her father's struggles, about the practical realities they all faced, she began to see a different kind of possibility. Maybe love didn't always start with passion and romance. Maybe sometimes it grew from mutual respect, shared responsibilities, and the gradual building of trust. Maybe there were different kinds of courage, not just the kind that sent you off to college, but the kind that made you stay and fight for the people you cared about. I need time to think, Sarah said finally. This isn't a decision I can make right now over coffee. Both men nodded, understanding the magnitude of what they were discussing. David stood up, preparing to leave. Take all the time you need, Sarah, and please don't feel any obligation. I'll figure out my situation regardless. As she watched him walk back to his truck, Sarah wondered if her life was about to take a completely unexpected turn. The Stanford letter still lay on the table, a reminder of the path she had planned. But maybe, just maybe, there was wisdom in considering a different route entirely. 3 days passed before Sarah made her decision. She spent those days walking through the fields, calling her best friend who had moved to Portland and having long conversations with her father about their family's future. The weight of responsibility felt crushing at times, but gradually she began to see the situation differently. On Thursday evening, she drove to David's house on the reservation. The small ranch-style home sat on 2 acres of land, with a vegetable garden that David's late wife had planted, and a swing set that showed signs of regular use. Emma and Michael were playing in the yard when Sarah arrived, their laughter carrying across the evening air. Miss Sarah, Emma called out, running toward the car with her dark braids flying behind her. Michael followed more cautiously, but his face lit up when he saw her. Hey there, little ones, Sarah said, crouching down to hug Emma. Is your dad home? He's cooking dinner, Michael announced proudly. He's making fry bread, but it doesn't taste like Mom's used to. The innocent comment tugged at Sarah's heart. She could see the sadness that still lingered in both children's eyes, the way they sometimes looked toward the house as if expecting their mother to appear in the doorway. These children needed stability, needed someone who could help fill the enormous gap left by their mother's death. David appeared on the porch, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Sarah, this is a nice surprise. Have you eaten dinner? Not yet, she admitted. Could we talk? He nodded and called to the children. Emma, Michael, wash up for dinner. Miss Sarah is joining us. The kitchen smelled of cooking oil and warm bread. Family photos lined the walls, showing happy memories of David with his late wife and children. Sarah noticed that David had kept everything exactly as it was, as if he couldn't bear to change anything that might erase his wife's presence. During dinner, Sarah watched how David interacted with his children. He was patient when Emma spilled her juice, gentle when correcting Michael's table manners, and attentive to their stories about school and friends. But she also noticed the exhaustion in his movements, the way he sometimes paused mid-sentence as if his mind had drifted somewhere else. After the children went to watch television in the living room, Sarah and David sat at the kitchen table with cups of coffee. The silence stretched between them, comfortable but charged with unspoken possibilities. I've been thinking about what my father suggested, Sarah began carefully. I know it sounds crazy, but maybe there's something to consider here. David's eyes searched her face. Sarah, you're young and bright and beautiful. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your future to help me with my problems. But maybe I wouldn't be sacrificing anything, she replied. Maybe I'd be choosing something different. I could take classes at the community college, work toward my degree slowly. Stanford will always be there if I decide to go later. And what about love? What about finding someone your own age? Someone you can build a real life with? Sarah considered this question carefully. David, can I ask you something personal? He nodded. Did you love your wife immediately when you met her? A soft smile crossed David's face. No, actually. We were arranged to be married by our families when we were very young. I was 19, she was 17. I respected her, found her attractive, but love came later as we built a life together. So love can grow from respect and shared purpose? It can, David agreed quietly. But that doesn't make this decision any easier. You would be taking on 2 children who aren't yours, a man who's still grieving, and a life that's very different from anything you've planned. Sarah looked toward the living room where she could hear Emma giggling at something on television. Those children need more than just a babysitter or housekeeper. They need someone who can be there consistently, who can help them heal from losing their mother. And you think you could do that? I think I could try. I think I'd want to try. David was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. There are things you should know about me, about my life, before you make any final decisions. Like what? I struggle with anger sometimes, especially since Linda died. Not toward the children, never toward them, but at the situation, at the unfairness of it all. I drink sometimes to sleep, though I'm careful never to do it when the kids are awake. I work 2 jobs and I'm still barely making ends meet. This isn't the comfortable life you deserve. Sarah appreciated his honesty. And there are things you should know about me too. I've never been in a serious relationship. I've never lived away from my parents' house. I don't know anything about being a stepmother or a wife. I might be terrible at it. You're wonderful with Emma and Michael, David observed. They've talked about you constantly since your father made his suggestion. This surprised Sarah. They have. Emma asked me if you might come live with us. She said you smell like flowers and you don't get impatient when she asks a million questions. Michael said you're the only grown-up who really listens when he talks about his rocks collection. Despite the seriousness of their conversation, Sarah smiled. I do listen to him. He knows more about geology than most adults. The point is, you already have a relationship with them. They trust you, and more importantly, they need you. Sarah felt the weight of that need settling around her shoulders. What would we tell people? How would we explain this arrangement? We tell them the truth, that we're 2 people who decided to help each other, who chose to build something together based on mutual respect and shared goals. We tell them that sometimes the best relationships grow from friendship and practical partnership, rather than just romantic passion. And what about intimate expectations? Sarah blushed as she asked the question. David's expression grew serious. We would take that part slowly if it happens at all. There would be no pressure, no expectations. We could start as partners and friends and see what develops naturally over time. Sarah nodded, relieved by his answer. I need to know that if I do this, I'm not just a convenient solution to your childcare problems. I need to know that you see me as a real person with my own dreams and goals. Sarah, David said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. If you agree to this, you wouldn't just be helping me, you'd be saving me. These past 2 years have been the hardest of my life, and trying to be everything these children need while dealing with my own grief has nearly broken me. But you wouldn't be a servant or a convenient solution. You'd be my partner, my equal, someone whose happiness and fulfillment would matter as much as my own. The sincerity in his voice moved her more than any romantic declaration might have. I think, she said slowly, I'd like to try this. Not marriage right away, but maybe I could move in as a nanny or caretaker for a few months. We could see how we all get along, whether this could really work. David squeezed her hand gently. Are you sure? Really sure? No, Sarah admitted with a laugh. I'm terrified, but I'm also curious about where this path might lead, and I care about those children more than I expected to. Then we'll try it, David said. We'll take it one day at a time and see what happens. As Sarah drove home that night, she felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't predict, but for the first time in months, she felt like she was moving toward something positive rather than just running from her problems. The Stanford letter was still on her dresser when she got home, but now it seemed less like a missed opportunity and more like a door that could be opened later if she chose. Some adventures, she realized, didn't require leaving home. Some could be found in the quiet courage of choosing an unexpected path and seeing where it led. Sarah moved into David's house on a crisp September morning, bringing with her 2 suitcases and a head full of doubts. The children had helped her arrange her belongings in what had once been David's home office, now converted into a small bedroom with a single bed and a desk where she could study for her community college courses. The first weeks were harder than she had anticipated. Emma, despite her initial enthusiasm, began testing boundaries almost immediately, asking repeatedly when Sarah would be leaving and whether she was trying to replace her mother. Michael retreated into himself, spending hours arranging his rock collection and speaking only when directly addressed. David worked long hours, leaving at 6 in the morning for the lumber mill and not returning until nearly midnight from his security job at the casino. Sarah found herself alone with the children most of the time, navigating homework battles, bedtime routines, and the complex emotional needs of 2 grieving kids. "I don't want to wear this dress," Emma announced one Thursday morning, throwing her school clothes on the floor. "Mommy always let me pick my own clothes." Sarah took a deep breath, reminding herself that the child's anger wasn't really about clothing. "Okay, what would you like to wear instead?" "I want to wear my princess costume to school." "How about we make a deal? You can wear your regular school clothes today, and this afternoon we can have princess time when you get home. We could even make cookies while you're dressed up." Emma considered this compromise, her lower lip still jutting out in defiance. "Will you braid my hair like Mommy used to?" "I can try. You might have to teach me how she did it." This breakthrough led to their first real bonding moment. Emma patiently instructed Sarah in the intricate braiding patterns her mother had used, occasionally sighing dramatically when Sarah's attempts didn't match her memory. But slowly they found their rhythm together. Michael proved more challenging. He was suspicious of Sarah's presence and seemed determined to show that he didn't need anyone's help. One evening she found him crying quietly over his homework, struggling with a math concept that seemed beyond his grade level. "Can I help?" Sarah offered gently. "No," Michael said firmly. "Dad says I need to figure things out for myself. Sometimes it's okay to ask for help. It doesn't mean you're not smart or capable." Michael looked up at her with eyes that seemed older than his 10 years. "Mom used to help me with math. She was really good at it, I bet she was. What do you think she would want you to do when you're stuck like this?" After a long pause, Michael slid the paper toward Sarah. "She would want me to keep trying until I understood it." They worked through the problems together, and Sarah discovered that Michael was incredibly bright, but had been promoted to a higher grade level without mastering some foundational concepts. She made a mental note to discuss this with David and possibly his teacher. David's absence during these early weeks was both a blessing and a challenge. Sarah appreciated the space to find her own way with the children, without him hovering or second-guessing her decisions, but she also felt isolated and unsure whether she was handling things correctly. Their first real conversation in weeks happened on a Saturday morning, when David didn't have to work his day job. Sarah was in the kitchen making pancakes when he shuffled in, still half asleep and wearing an old t-shirt and jeans. "You don't have to do that," he said, gesturing toward the stove. "I can make breakfast for the kids, I don't mind. Besides, Emma specifically requested my special pancakes." Sarah smiled. "Apparently adding chocolate chips makes them magical." David poured himself coffee and sat at the table watching her work. "How are things going, really?" Sarah flipped a pancake before answering. "It's challenging. Emma is testing me constantly, and Michael barely speaks to me unless it's about homework. But I think we're making progress. I know this isn't what you signed up for. 2 difficult kids and an absent partner." "You're not absent by choice," Sarah pointed out. "You're working 2 jobs to support your family. I understand that. Still, it's not fair to you. You're 24 years younger than me, and instead of going to college parties, you're dealing with bedtime tantrums and school projects." Sarah set a plate of pancakes in front of him. "David, can I ask you something? Do you regret our arrangement?" He looked up, surprised. "No, why would you ask that?" "Because you seem guilty all the time, like you've trapped me in a life I don't want. But the truth is, I chose this. I'm here because I want to be here. Even when Emma had that meltdown in the grocery store last week. Even when Michael refused to speak to you for 3 days." Sarah laughed. "Especially then. Those moments tell me how much these children need stability and patience. Their behavior isn't personal. It's grief and fear and confusion about how their world keeps changing. David studied her face intently. You've thought about this a lot. I've been reading books about child psychology and grief counseling. I want to understand what Emma and Michael are going through so I can help them better. You've been studying child psychology? At the library, online, wherever I can find information. I figured if I'm going to be in their lives, I should know what I'm doing. Something shifted in David's expression, a warmth that hadn't been there before. That's amazing, Sarah. Most people would just wing it or give up. I'm not most people, apparently. She sat down across from him with her own plate. I've also been thinking about our situation, about where this is all heading. And I think we need to be more honest with each other about what we want this to become. Are we just roommates helping each other out? Are we building towards something more? I need to know so I can adjust my expectations accordingly. David was quiet for a long moment, cutting his pancakes into precise squares. What do you want it to become? I asked you first. He smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in weeks. I want it to become real. I want us to become a real family, not just a convenient arrangement. But I don't want to pressure you into something you're not ready for. What would real look like to you? Marriage, eventually. A partnership where we make decisions together, where we're committed to each other and to the children long term, where what happens to one of us matters to all of us. Sarah felt her heart beat faster. And the physical side of marriage? David's cheeks reddened slightly. I'd want that too when you're ready. When it feels natural and right for both of us. I'm not in any hurry. Good, Sarah said, surprising herself with her directness. Because I need time to figure out how I feel about you as more than just a partner in child rearing. That's fair. But I want you to know that I like you. David, I respect you, I enjoy talking with you, and I find you attractive. I just need to know that any feelings that develop between us are real, and not just born out of convenience or gratitude. David reached across the table and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. I like you too, Sarah, more than I expected to. And I promise you, any feelings I develop won't be about convenience. You're a remarkable woman, and I feel lucky that you're giving this a chance. Their conversation was interrupted by Emma bounding into the kitchen, her hair still messy from sleep and her pajamas wrinkled. Sarah, you made pancakes. Are they the magical kind? They're whatever kind you want them to be, Sarah replied, squeezing David's hand before releasing it to serve Emma breakfast. As she watched the little girl dig into her food with enthusiasm, Sarah realized that somewhere in the past few weeks, she had stopped thinking of this as a temporary arrangement. The children felt like hers to protect and nurture. David felt like a partner worth building something with. This house was starting to feel like home. Maybe love didn't always announce itself with fireworks and dramatic declarations. Maybe sometimes it grew quietly in the spaces between ordinary moments, in shared responsibilities and small kindnesses, in the choice to show up for each other day after day. By November, their unconventional family had found its rhythm. Sarah had enrolled in 3 courses at the community college, managing to schedule her classes around the children's school hours. Emma had finally stopped asking when Sarah was leaving, and had begun referring to her as my Sarah when talking to friends. Michael had slowly opened up, sharing his geological discoveries and even asking Sarah to help him build a display case for his favorite specimens. David had managed to reduce his hours at the casino to 3 nights a week, which meant more family dinners and bedtime routines together. The change in his presence made an enormous difference in the household dynamics. Sarah no longer felt like she was managing everything alone, and the children clearly thrived, with more access to their father. It was during one of these family dinners that David made an announcement. That would change everything. I've been offered a promotion at the mill, he said, setting down his fork and looking around the table. It would mean more money, better benefits, and normal day hours. That's wonderful, Sarah exclaimed. You'd be home in the evenings and we could have dinner together every night. There's a catch, David continued, his expression growing serious. The position requires a college degree and I never finished mine. I'd need to complete my last 2 years while working full-time. Emma looked confused. What does that mean, Daddy? It means Daddy would have to go to school just like you do, Sarah explained gently. Michael perked up with interest. Would you have homework? David laughed. Yes, probably lots of homework. That's what worries me. I wouldn't have much time to help around here, at least not for the next 2 years. I could help more, Sarah offered immediately. I could cut back on my own classes, take over more of the household responsibilities. Sarah, that's not fair to you. You have your own education to think about. But this is an incredible opportunity for our family, she said, then stopped, realizing what she had just said. Our family. The words had come naturally, without thought or hesitation. David's eyes met hers across the table, and she saw something warm and grateful in his gaze. You really see it that way? As our family? Yes, Sarah said simply. I do. That evening, after the children were in bed, Sarah and David sat on the front porch swing that Linda had loved so much. The autumn air was crisp, and Sarah had wrapped herself in one of Linda's old sweaters, something that no longer felt strange or inappropriate. Tell me about the promotion, Sarah said, curling up against David's side. Physical affection had grown naturally between them over the past weeks. Small touches, brief hugs, hands held during conversations. Nothing dramatic or passionate, but a comfortable intimacy that felt right for both of them. It's a supervisory position in the main office. I'd be managing scheduling and quality control for the entire operation. The salary would be almost double what I make now. David, that's amazing. You have to take it. But the education requirement, we'll figure it out. I can handle more of the children's needs, and maybe we can study together in the evenings. It might actually be fun, both of us working on our degrees at the same time. David was quiet for a moment, gently rocking the swing. There's something else. Something I should tell you before you make any more sacrifices for this family. Something in his tone made Sarah sit up straighter. What is it? When Linda died, I wasn't completely honest with the children about how it happened. I told them it was a car accident, which was technically true, but Sarah waited, sensing that this was something David had been carrying alone for too long. She was driving to meet another man, David said quietly. She had been having an affair for about 6 months before she died. That night she was leaving me. She was going to take the children and move in with him. Sarah felt her breath catch. David! The accident happened on the highway between here and his house. She had suitcases in the car, documents she had prepared for divorce proceedings, letters she had written to the children explaining why Daddy wouldn't be living with them anymore. Did the children know? No. The police kept it quiet out of respect, and I destroyed all the evidence of her plans. As far as Emma and Michael know, their mother died in a random accident while running errands. Sarah tried to process this information. Who was he? The other man? Someone from the casino where I work now, ironically. He was married too, with children of his own. After Linda died, he transferred to another location, and I never saw him again. David, I'm so sorry. You've been carrying this pain all alone while grieving publicly for a marriage that had already ended. That's not the worst part, David continued, his voice barely above a whisper. The worst part is that I was relieved. Not that she died, I would never have wished that on her or on the children. But relieved that I wouldn't have to go through a custody battle, that the children wouldn't have to choose between parents, that I wouldn't have to explain to everyone why our marriage failed. That's a normal reaction, Sarah said gently. Complex grief is common when relationships end in tragedy before they can be properly resolved. Is it? Because sometimes I feel like a fraud. People see me as this devoted widower who lost the love of his life, and I let them believe it because it's easier than admitting my wife wanted to leave me. Sarah took David's hands in hers. Why are you telling me this now? Because if we're going to build something real together, if we're talking about marriage and commitment, you need to know the truth about who I am. You need to know that I failed at marriage once, that my wife found me inadequate enough to risk everything to get away from me. David, look at me. Sarah turned to face him fully. Your wife's choices don't define your worth as a husband or a person. People leave marriages for all kinds of reasons, and it's rarely about one person being inadequate. Maybe she was unhappy. Maybe she felt trapped. Maybe she made poor decisions. But none of that means you're doomed to repeat the same patterns. How can you be so sure? Because I've lived with you for 3 months. I've seen how you treat people, how you parent your children, how you've welcomed me into your life with patience and respect. I've seen your kindness, your work ethic, your integrity. Whatever problems existed in your first marriage, they don't automatically carry over into any future relationship. David studied her face in the dim porch light. You're not disappointed in me? Not worried about committing to someone whose first marriage was a failure? I'm not disappointed. If anything, I'm grateful that you trusted me enough to tell me the truth. And David, as for failure, Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. Your marriage may have ended, but you didn't fail as a father or as a man. You've raised two wonderful children under incredibly difficult circumstances. You've worked multiple jobs to keep your family afloat. You've honored your wife's memory despite knowing she was planning to leave. That's not failure, that's character. David pulled her closer, and Sarah could feel some of the tension leave his body. I was so afraid you'd change your mind about us once you knew. The only thing that's changed is that I understand you better now. And I admire you even more for carrying this burden with such grace. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, rocking slowly on the swing. Finally, Sarah spoke again. We should talk about the promotion again. I really think you should take it. Even knowing that it means less time together while I finish my degree.
Less help with the children?
Especially knowing that. This family deserves financial security and a father who's fulfilled in his work. We can make the sacrifices necessary to get there. Are you sure you're only 18? David asked with a small smile. Sometimes you seem wiser than people twice your age. Hardship ages you quickly, Sarah replied. But it also teaches you what really matters. What matters is that we take care of each other, support each other's dreams, and build something stable for Emma and Michael. And us? What about building something for us? Sarah turned to look at him, seeing vulnerability in his dark eyes. I think we already are, David. Every day, every conversation, every moment we choose to be here for each other. We're building something. Maybe not in the traditional way, but it's real and it's ours. I love you, David said suddenly, then looked surprised at his own words. I'm sorry, I didn't plan to say that. Sarah felt her heart race, but not with panic or fear. With recognition. I love you too, she said, realizing as she spoke the words that they had been true for a while. I think I have for weeks, but I was afraid to admit it. Because of our age difference? Because of how this started? No, because love makes everything more complicated and more scary. But also more worth fighting for. David leaned down and kissed her then, gently and sweetly. Their first real kiss as a couple rather than as partners in an arrangement. When they broke apart, Sarah felt something settle into place inside her chest, a sense of rightness and belonging that she had never experienced before. So, we'll do this? David asked. The promotion, school, building a real marriage together. We'll do this, Sarah confirmed. All of it together. As they went inside to check on the children one last time before bed, Sarah realized that she had never written back to Stanford to formally decline their offer. Tomorrow, she decided she would write that letter. Not with regret, but with gratitude for the path that had led her exactly where. Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it a sense of renewal and possibility that seemed to mirror the changes happening in their household. David had been accepted into the degree completion program at the state university and would start his promotion in June. Sarah had maintained a 4.0 GPA in her community college courses while taking on additional responsibilities with the children. Their relationship had deepened into something that felt both comfortable and exciting, built on a foundation of shared purpose and growing affection. The decision to marry came naturally, discussed during quiet evening conversations rather than proposed with grand gestures. They planned a small ceremony for late May, just before David started his new position. Sarah's father would walk her down the aisle, and David's elderly mother would travel from the reservation in Arizona to attend. Emma was thrilled to be the flower girl, while Michael had reluctantly agreed to be the ring bearer. Are you nervous? Sarah's best friend Jessica asked as they addressed wedding invitations at Sarah's old kitchen table. Jessica had driven down from Portland, initially concerned that Sarah was making a terrible mistake, but gradually warming to David and the unusual circumstances of their relationship. Not about marrying David, Sarah replied honestly, but about everything else that comes with it. Officially becoming a stepmother, taking on Linda's role in the children's lives, being married at 19 to a man most people will judge me for choosing. What do you mean, judge you? Sarah set down her pen and looked at her friend. Come on, Jess. A teenage girl marrying a man in his 40s with 2 kids? People are going to assume I'm either a gold digger or that something inappropriate happened. They're not going to understand that we chose this deliberately, that it grew into real love. Do you care what they think? More than I should, Sarah admitted. I care that David might be embarrassed by having such a young wife. I care that Emma and Michael might get teased at school about their stepmother being closer to their age than their father's. Care that my own family might always wonder if I settled for less than I deserved. Jessica reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. For what it's worth, I've watched you with those kids and I've seen how David looks at you. This isn't settling. This is choosing something most people never find. A partnership based on genuine care and mutual respect. How can you be so sure? Because David talks about your education like it's as important as his own. Because you light up when you discuss your plans for the family. Because those children adore you in a way that can't be faked or forced. And because when I watch you two together, I see something real. Even if it's different from what I expected love to look like. That evening, Sarah and David took their usual walk around the property, discussing wedding details and their hopes for the future. The air smelled of wildflowers and new grass, and Sarah felt more settled and confident than she had in weeks. I've been thinking about our honeymoon, David said as they paused by the small creek that ran through the back of his land. What kind of thinking? Well, we can't really go anywhere elaborate because of the children and money, but I thought maybe we could send Emma and Michael to stay with your father for a few days. Give ourselves some time alone in our own house, some privacy to figure out this part of our relationship. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. They had been sharing increasingly intimate moments, longer kisses, nights spent holding each other while talking, the kind of physical closeness that suggested they were both ready for more. But they had been careful to respect the children's presence and their own need to let things develop naturally. I'd like that, she said. I think we're ready for that step. Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured because we're getting married. David, I'm sure. I want to be your wife in every sense of the word. I want us to have that intimacy, that connection. He stopped walking and turned to face her. I need you to know that I've never been with anyone except Linda. I might not know what I'm doing, might not be good at. Well, at making you happy in that way. Sarah smiled at his vulnerability. Then we'll figure it out together. That's what partnerships are for, right? Learning and growing together. You're amazing, do you know that? Most women your age would run screaming from a man with my baggage and limitations. Most women my age haven't had the experiences that taught me what really matters in life, Sarah replied. Besides, I have baggage too. I've never been with anyone at all. I might be the one who doesn't know what she's doing. Then we'll be confused together, David said with a laugh, pulling her into his arms. I can live with that. Their kiss was deeper than usual, full of promise and anticipation. When they broke apart, Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with excitement about what lay ahead for them. 2 weeks before the wedding, Sarah received an unexpected phone call from Stanford University. The admissions officer explained that they had held her spot in the hope that her circumstances might change, and wanted to offer her one final opportunity to join the fall semester. It's a generous offer, Sarah told David that evening as they sat in their bedroom, her head resting on his shoulder. She had moved into his room the week before, though they were still taking physical intimacy slowly. It is, David agreed carefully. What did you tell them? I told them I needed to discuss it with my husband-to-be and would call them back tomorrow. And what are you thinking? Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. I'm thinking about the girl who received that acceptance letter 9 months ago, and how different she was from who I am now. She wanted to escape this small town and build an independent life in a big city. She was afraid of being trapped by family obligations and small-town thinking. And now I realize that building a life isn't about geography or prestige. It's about finding people worth committing to and work worth doing. I've found both of those things here. But Stanford is still an incredible opportunity. If you want to go, we'll find a way to make it work. Maybe the children and I could move closer to campus, or maybe you could come home on weekends. Sarah turned to look at him directly. David, do you want me to go? I want you to be happy and fulfilled. If that means going to Stanford, then yes, I want you to go. That's not what I asked. Do you personally want me to leave for college? David was quiet for a long time. No, he admitted finally. I don't want you to leave. I love having you here, building this life with me and the children. But my wants shouldn't determine your future. What if my wants align with your wants? What if what I want is to stay here, finish my degree slowly while raising Emma and Michael and build something lasting with you? Then I would be the luckiest man alive, David said softly. Good, because that's exactly what I want. Sarah kissed his cheek. I'll call them tomorrow and officially decline. Stanford will always be there if I change my mind in the future, but right now, this is where I belong. Are you absolutely certain? David, 9 months ago I was a girl with a plan but no real understanding of what I wanted from life. Now I'm a woman who knows the difference between opportunity and calling. This family, this relationship, this life we're building, this is my calling. The next morning, Sarah made the phone call that officially closed one chapter of her life and committed her fully to another. When she hung up the phone, she felt not regret, but relief, as if she had finally stopped fighting against the current and allowed herself to flow toward her true destination. No second thoughts? David asked that evening as they watched Emma and Michael play in the yard. None, Sarah said firmly. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. As they sat together on the porch swing, Sarah reflected on how much had changed in less than a year. She had gone from being a sheltered teenager with big dreams and little life experience to being a young woman preparing for marriage and stepmotherhood. The transformation felt natural rather than forced, as if she had simply grown into the person she was always meant to become. The wedding was 2 weeks away, and after that, their real life together would begin. Sarah looked forward to every part of it, the challenges and the joys, the ordinary moments and the significant milestones. She was ready to be David's wife, Emma and Michael's stepmother, and most importantly herself in the fullest sense she had ever experienced. Some people might call it settling, but Sarah knew better. Sometimes the most adventurous thing you could do was choose love over fear, commitment over independence, and building something meaningful over chasing something that might be bigger but wasn't necessarily better. She had made her choice and she was at peace with it. The wedding took place on a perfect May afternoon in the small church where Linda had been memorialized 2 years earlier. Sarah had initially worried about the symbolism of marrying David in the same place where people had mourned his first wife. But David's mother had gently explained that in Modoc tradition, it was important to honor the past while embracing the future. The church was where their community gathered for all of life's significant moments, and this was simply another chapter in the continuing story. Sarah wore a simple cream-colored dress that her mother would have loved, with Emma's help in choosing wildflowers for her bouquet. The guest list was small, about 30 people including family, close friends, and David's colleagues from work. Sarah's father walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, while Emma scattered rose petals with more enthusiasm than precision. "You look beautiful," David whispered as she reached the altar, and Sarah felt her nervousness melt away. This was right. This was exactly where she belonged. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. David's uncle, a tribal elder, performed a blessing in their native language, while the pastor spoke about the importance of chosen family and commitment that grows from respect rather than just passion. When they exchanged rings, Michael stepped forward solemnly with the pillow, and Sarah caught him wiping away tears he was trying to hide. "I promise to love you, support your dreams, and help you raise these beautiful children," Sarah said in her vows. "I promise to be your partner in all things and to choose this family every day for the rest of my life. I promise to cherish you, protect your happiness, and never take for granted the gift of your presence in our lives," David replied. "I promise to be worthy of your love and your sacrifice and to help you become everything you're meant to be." When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, David's kiss was gentle and full of promise. The small congregation erupted in applause, and Sarah felt overwhelmed by the warmth and acceptance she saw on every face. Even the people who had initially questioned their unusual courtship seemed genuinely happy for them. At the reception, held in the church fellowship hall, Sarah danced with her new husband while Emma and Michael spun around them in circles, laughing and calling her mom for the first time. The words still felt strange and wonderful on their tongues, but Sarah could tell they were testing it out, seeing how it felt to finally have that role filled again. "So how does it feel to be Mrs. Crowfeather?" Jessica asked as they sat together during a break in the dancing. "Surreal," Sarah admitted, "but also completely natural, if that makes sense. Like I've been heading toward this moment my entire life without knowing it. And you're really okay with everything you're giving up? College, career opportunities, dating other people." Sarah looked across the room where David was teaching Michael how to properly lead a dance partner. "Jess, I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing something better than what I had planned. Look at those children. They need stability and love. Look at David. He needs a partner who sees his worth. I need to be needed, to be part of something bigger than my individual ambitions." When you put it that way, it sounds like you're exactly where you should be. I am, Sarah said with certainty. I really am. The evening wound down with Sarah and David finally alone in their house for the first time as a married couple. The children were spending the weekend with Sarah's father, giving them privacy to begin their married life together. As they cleaned up the small signs of celebration scattered around their home, Sarah felt a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. Any regrets? David asked as they stood in their bedroom, suddenly shy despite months of growing intimacy. None, Sarah said, moving closer to him, although I am nervous. Me too, David admitted. It's been over 3 years since. Then we'll take it slowly. We have all the time in the world. Their wedding night was tender and careful, full of whispered reassurances and gentle discoveries. Sarah understood why people wrote poetry about physical love. It was simultaneously more overwhelming and more natural than she had expected. David was patient and attentive, constantly checking that she was comfortable, that she wanted to continue. When they finally came together as husband and wife, Sarah felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with physical pleasure and everything to do with the deep emotional connection they had built over the past 8 months. Afterward, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms, Sarah traced patterns on David's chest and marveled at how right everything felt. I love you, she whispered against his shoulder. I love you too, David replied, his voice full of wonder. More than I ever thought I could love anyone again. Even though I'm so young? Even though I have no idea what I'm doing half the time? Especially because of those things. You came into our lives like a gift, Sarah. You brought energy and hope and a future I had stopped believing in. The next few days passed in a haze of domestic bliss and growing comfort with their new dynamic as a married couple. They made breakfast together, worked in Linda's old garden that Sarah was slowly making her own, and spent long hours talking about their plans for David's education and their family's future. When Emma and Michael returned on Sunday evening, they seemed to immediately sense that something fundamental had shifted. Their father and Sarah moved around each other differently now, with the easy intimacy of true partners. At dinner, Emma announced that she had decided to officially call Sarah Mom if that was okay. It's more than okay, Sarah said, her throat tight with emotion. It would make me very happy. Michael, always more reserved, approached Sarah later that evening as she was reading in the living room. Can I still call you Sarah sometimes? When it's just us? Of course you can. You can call me whatever feels right to you whenever it feels right. But you're really my mom now? Legally and everything? If you want me to be, then yes. The adoption papers are already being processed. Michael nodded seriously, then surprised her by climbing onto the couch next to her. I'm glad Dad married you. You make him smile again. Sarah hugged him tightly, overwhelmed by the simple acceptance in his words. You make me smile too, Michael. All of you do. That night, as Sarah and David lay in bed discussing the children's reactions to their marriage, Sarah realized that she had never felt more settled or content in her life. Do you think Linda would approve? She asked quietly. Of us, of how we're raising her children? David was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. I think she would be grateful that Emma and Michael have someone who loves them unconditionally. I think she would appreciate that you've helped me become a better father and a happier man. And I think she would respect the way you've honored her memory while making your own place in this family. I hope so. I never wanted to replace her, just to fill the gap she left behind. You haven't replaced her, David said, kissing Sarah's forehead. You've created something entirely new, something that's uniquely yours and uniquely ours. As Sarah drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, she thought about the letter from Stanford that she had finally thrown away the week before. The girl who had received that acceptance letter felt like a stranger now, someone with completely different dreams and priorities. This woman, this wife and mother, was who she was always meant to become, even if she hadn't known it at the time. Some stories, she reflected sleepily, didn't follow the paths you expected them to take. Sometimes the most extraordinary adventures happened right where you were, when you opened your heart to possibilities you had never imagined. Sometimes the greatest courage was found not in leaving home to seek your fortune, but in staying to build something beautiful with people who needed you as much as you needed them. Sarah Crowfeather fell asleep that night, knowing she was exactly where she belonged, surrounded by a love that was deeper and more satisfying than any dream she had ever dared to dream. 5 years had passed since Sarah walked down the aisle to marry David, and their life had evolved into something richer and more complex than either of them had imagined possible. David had completed his degree and excelled in his supervisory position, earning 2 more promotions and the respect of everyone at the mill. Sarah had finished her bachelor's degree in elementary education through a combination of online courses and weekend classes, graduating summa cum laude while managing the household and raising Emma and Michael. Now 24, Sarah taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school and had become known throughout the community for her innovative teaching methods and her ability to connect with struggling students. Emma at 12 was showing artistic talents that reminded everyone of her mother, while 14-year-old Michael had become fascinated with environmental science and spent his free time monitoring the health of local waterways. Their marriage had deepened into the kind of partnership Sarah had hoped for but hadn't dared to expect. They made decisions together, supported each other's ambitions, and had learned to navigate the challenges that came with blending a family and bridging their age gap. Most people in town had long since stopped commenting on their unusual beginning, seeing only the obvious love and stability they had built together. But on a crisp October morning, their carefully constructed world was about to face its greatest test. Sarah was grading papers at the kitchen table when the phone rang. David answered, and she could tell immediately from his tone that something was wrong. "Yes, this is David Crowfeather," he said, his voice tense. "What, are you certain?" Sarah looked up, her teacher instincts picking up on the shift in energy. David's face had gone pale and his free hand was gripping the edge of the counter. "I understand. No, I need some time to process this. Can you call me back tomorrow?" When he hung up, David stood frozen for a moment, staring at the phone as if it might ring again and deliver different news. "David, what's wrong?" Sarah asked, setting aside her papers. "That was a private investigator," David said slowly, still facing away from her. "Someone hired him to find information about Linda's death." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "What kind of information?" David turned around and she could see the fear in his eyes. "The man Linda was involved with, Richard Hastings, he's been arrested for insurance fraud. During the investigation, some details about his past relationships came to light. Apparently, he's been running the same scheme for years, targeting married women, convincing them to leave their husbands, and then collecting on life insurance policies when convenient accidents occur." "David, what are you saying?" "The investigator thinks Linda's accident might not have been an accident. He thinks Richard Hastings might have been planning to collect on a life insurance policy that Linda didn't know she had taken out." Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her. "But she was leaving you for him. Why would he want her dead?" "Because she was having second thoughts. The investigator found letters Linda wrote but never sent. Letters where she talked about missing the children, about wondering if she was making a mistake. Apparently, she had started pulling back from Richard in the weeks before she died." Sarah moved around the table to stand beside her husband. "What does this mean for us?" "For the children? It means our entire life together might be built on a lie," David said, his voice breaking. "It means Linda might have been murdered, and I've spent 5 years letting everyone believe she died while running away from us. It means Emma and Michael might find out that their mother didn't choose to leave them. She was killed because she wanted to come home." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. If Linda had been having second thoughts, if she had been planning to return to her family, then everything they believed about her betrayal was wrong. And if Richard Hastings had killed her to prevent her from backing out of their plans, then David had spent years carrying guilt and shame for a marriage that might have been saved. "We have to tell the children," Sarah said quietly. "How? How do I explain to Emma and Michael that I've been lying to them for 5 years? That their mother might still be alive if I had fought harder for our marriage instead of just letting her go? David, you couldn't have known. If this is true, if Linda really was murdered, that's not your fault, isn't it? I was so focused on my pride, so hurt by her betrayal, that I never questioned the circumstances of her death. I never demanded a thorough investigation. I just accepted it and moved on." Sarah could see David spiraling into self-blame, the same pattern that had nearly destroyed him after Linda's death. "Listen to me," she said firmly, taking his hands in hers. "If Linda was murdered, the only person responsible is the man who killed her. Not you, not anyone else, but what about us?" David asked, looking at her with desperate eyes. "What about our marriage? We built our relationship on the assumption that Linda had chosen to leave us. If she was actually trying to come home, Sarah felt a chill run through her as she understood what he was asking. If Linda had been murdered while trying to return to her family, did that invalidate the life Sarah and David had built together? Did it mean their love was somehow wrong or inappropriate? Our marriage is real, David. Our love is real. Linda's death, however it happened, doesn't change that. But the children might see it differently. They might feel like I replaced their mother too quickly, like I didn't love her enough to seek justice for her death. Or they might see that you gave them stability and love when they needed it most. They might see that you built a good life from tragedy, regardless of how that tragedy occurred. David was quiet for a long time, processing the implications. The investigator wants to exhume Linda's body for a more thorough autopsy. He wants to interview me, the children, anyone who knew about Linda's relationship with Richard. Our private life is going to become public, Sarah. Everyone is going to know the details we've kept hidden. Then we'll face it together, Sarah said. We'll tell Emma and Michael the truth, all of it. We'll support the investigation if it means getting justice for Linda. And we'll deal with whatever comes after that as a family. What if the children blame me? What if they decide they can't forgive me for not fighting harder to save their mother? Then we'll work through that too. David, these children love you. They love us. That doesn't disappear because new information comes to light. That evening after dinner, Sarah and David sat Emma and Michael down in the living room for what would be the most difficult conversation of their family's life. There's something we need to tell you about your mother, David began, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. Something I should have told you years ago. Over the next hour, David explained everything: Linda's affair, her plans to leave, the circumstances of her death, and now the possibility that she had been murdered while trying to return home. Emma cried openly while Michael sat in stunned silence, processing the revelation that their mother's story was far more complicated than they had been told. So she wasn't really leaving us? Emma asked through her tears. She was coming back. We don't know for certain, David said honestly, but it's possible. The investigator thinks she might have changed her mind about leaving. Michael, who had been quiet throughout the explanation, finally spoke. Why didn't you tell us before? Why did we have to believe she died while abandoning us? Because I was trying to protect you from pain I thought was unnecessary. I thought it would be easier for you to believe she died in a simple accident than to know about the affair and the complications. But instead, we spent years thinking our mother didn't love us enough to stay, Michael said, his voice cold with anger. We thought we weren't important enough for her to choose us over someone else. Sarah felt her heart break for both children, understanding finally how deeply David's well-intentioned deception had wounded them. Your mother loved you both more than anything in the world, she said gently. That never changed regardless of her other choices. How can you know that? Emma demanded. You didn't even know her. Because I know you two. I know the kind of children she raised, the values she instilled in you, the love she poured into your lives during the time she had with you. That kind of love doesn't just disappear. The family spent the rest of the evening talking through their emotions, their fears, and their questions about what would happen next. It was painful and difficult, but Sarah felt hopeful that they were finally dealing with truth instead of comfortable fiction. As she and David lay in bed that night, both exhausted by the emotional upheaval, Sarah realized that this crisis might ultimately strengthen their family rather than destroy it. I'm scared, David admitted in the darkness. Me too, Sarah replied, but we'll get through this. We've survived worse things than the truth, have we? I'm not sure our marriage can survive the guilt I'm feeling right now. If Linda was trying to come home, if she died because I wasn't there to protect her. David, look at me, Sarah said, turning on the bedside lamp. Our marriage isn't built on Linda's mistakes or your failures. It's built on 5 years of daily choices to love and support each other. It's built on the family we've created together, the children we've raised, the dreams we've pursued side by side. None of that becomes less real because we're learning new information about the past. But what if the investigation proves that Linda was murdered? What if I have to testify about our marriage problems, about why I didn't fight harder to keep her? Then you'll tell the truth and you'll help get justice for the mother of your children. And I'll be right there beside you, because that's what wives do. We stand by our husbands when they're facing the hardest moments of their lives. David pulled Sarah close, holding her as if she might disappear. I love you so much. I'm terrified of losing you over this. "You're not going to lose me," Sarah said firmly. "Whatever comes next, whatever we learn about Linda's death, whatever the children need from us, we'll face it together. That's what we promised each other 5 years ago, and it's what I'm promising you again right now." As dawn broke over their quiet house, Sarah knew their lives were about to change dramatically. The investigation would likely be painful and public, dredging up details that would hurt everyone involved. The children would need time and probably counseling to process their complex feelings about their mother's true story. David would need support as he dealt with guilt and regret that might never fully disappear. But Sarah also knew with absolute certainty that their family was strong enough to survive this storm. They had built something real and lasting, something that could withstand the revelation of uncomfortable truths about the past. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them with honesty, courage, and the unshakable commitment they had made to each other and to their children. The girl who had once dreamed of escaping to Stanford University was long gone, replaced by a woman who understood that the greatest adventures weren't always found in distant places. Sometimes they were found in the choice to stay and fight for the people you loved, even when that fight became more complicated and difficult than you had ever imagined. Sarah Crow Feather was ready for whatever came next, because she was exactly where she belonged, standing beside the man she loved, protecting the children who needed them both, and facing the truth with the courage that only comes from knowing your life has meaning and purpose beyond your individual dreams. Their story was far from over, but Sarah was confident it would continue to be a story worth telling.